Greetings and salutations. This is Jason Silverain. Today I'll be doing something a little bit different for Rakenzarn Tales. Now, I did miss a few things during my playthrough. I will be going back to cover those, to find Rayman and the other characters I missed. But those won't take very long, and I kind of want to do it a sit down and just a little bit of a discussion about the latest release of Rakenzarn Tales and put all my thoughts together in one coherent space. Yeah, sadly I don't do scripts very well. I've learned that while trying to do reviews. And of course, since I'm mostly doing things as I experience them and getting a little bit of memory, I can be quite badly affected by burnout. And because Rakenzarn Tales this time was on top of all my really long shifts in the middle of a heatwave and stuff, I was a little fried before I was even playing the game, never mind just playing it straight for 6 or 7 hours each time. So this gives me a chance to sort of sit back, look back, and basically put all my thoughts down on video. But this has also been the case for actually Dark Q and the team. The Rakenzarn Tales team have also been suffering from, limited time, limited opportunities to work on certain aspects, and I think it shows a little bit where a few areas needed a bit more polish, but overall, in spite of my negativity about the last bit of the finale, it's been an excellent update. Now, how to phrase this, should I say? Yes, I'll just start from the top. Mechanically, the alterations to the weapon system have been great. The redesign of the characters in this latest version has been great. Essentially, apart from a few characters being a little weak and suffering from essentially early development issues, Kite especially, I keep saying this, Kite is sadly a little too weak and isn't even a jack of all trades. He's a master at nothing. Compared to the other characters that were designed later. And he's already had several buffs and he's not quite caught up yet. He needs some tweaking. I think there are alterations to characters like Daffy, which embrace more of his toon side rather than the weird archer moveset and all that lot. That's worked really well. I think the focus on an original character has actually worked better. As much as I've liked Q more during the first stages of the development of this, I honestly think at this rate, Q's story should be put to one side and you should focus on your original character at this point. You've clearly got a story in mind for him, and honestly, if you can even get one of the sides, one of the playthroughs finished, that would actually make Rakenzarn Tales a somewhat complete game. Even if for whatever reason you couldn't finish both sides. Heck, the Q section might even be eventually removed in further updates, and some of those mechanics brought over into the main storyline. Would I be pleased with that? I honestly don't know. I really enjoyed the early builds of Rakenzarn Tales, but there's so much more you can do with storytelling with a character of your own design than you can with a character where you have expectations built upon them. And that's going to be one of the main problems of Rakenzarn Tales going forward. All of these characters are established personalities. Some of them more than one, depending on what version of them you use. But the fan base will always have a image in mind of how this character will react. And I'm going to bring that up again later, especially with the Ganondorf issue I was having. And I've actually gone and looked at this, and there's quite a lot I've got to talk about that. Now, mechanically, where should I start? Yes, sprite work, reasonably good. There's a few that are still a little janky and could be tidied up. Others are just outright awful, like King, sadly. The animations and the cutscenes, those have been integrated very well, apart from the Angel Island one occasionally crashing. I don't know if that's just an RPG Maker thing. It's always been unstable when you've added videos into it. And it just seems to be that one that causes the crashes the most. I can get it somewhat consistent, the crash, and I honestly don't think there's anything you do to program that one out. The changes to the weapon system, very good. Whilst there is the issue of a lot of the most powerful weapons being dark type for characters, that could also play against the fact that dark type weapons just have a higher stat buff but there's more chances that enemies will be resistant to them. It's a bit more of a problem when you've got characters that are highly dark reliant and don't really have a kind of a counter-attack to anything that isn't. But overall, that's not too bad. It's one of the reasons I've stopped using my Dark Magician Girl as much. Also the fact I've kind of played her to death at this point. I was trying to expand and change to some of the other characters and mix things up a bit. I think that the SP costs and the special moves on weapons not having a cooldown is a good development, but before they were just very poor man's versions of the character's own special moves. And it really does come down to, with a few of them, whether or not you keep saving up so you can use all your character's moves when their cooldowns end, or you keep on pressing the attack with the weapon skills. The weapon skills are still pretty poor in comparison, but that honestly comes down to certain characters just having trash stats. Like Taz has terrible magic. Of course, if his weapon has a magic ability, it's not going to be useful. And I honestly think that a few of the characters, a few of the weapon types, if they've got a weapon type that's specifically like that, maybe culling some of the weapon skills might be a good idea. For example, like a handful of the axe skills, you probably don't need the magic version as well as the physical attack version, because they're not going to be put on a character that has a decent magic skill at all. But on the other flip side, because our main character can use all weapons, that means that if you were to use an axe with your main character, you wouldn't have access to a magic attack. So I can sort of see the argument for having both, but it can sort of lead to a cluttered UI. And Rakenzarn Tales does suffer from a cluttered UI, but again, I think that's just the clunkiness of RPG Maker. The team have been trying to put just about every damn feature they like into this game to an impressive level, and it does stack up a bit. There's also, I think, some clarity needs to be done with the journal or story, because there's a lot of like information that gets thrown at you during the game regarding world building and the like, and there's no real good way to review it all. Like, I was trying to figure out what all the different continents and kingdoms and where they were, because they were briefly mentioned, but I don't think it's actually mentioned anywhere in the sort of recap notes. So, oh well. I'm going to be going mostly off of a very faded memory, so apologies if I get anything wrong. So that mechanically works quite well. The removal of the cooldown off of your equivalent of limit break moves, I'm just going to call them limit breaks right now, I prefer. Granted, you now can do the cheesy tactic, which I kept doing during nearly all of my playthrough of Rakenzarn Tales, of building that up to max, and then just unleashing it on bosses. Yeah, I can keep doing that. I like that. It's kind of fun. I could understand why there was a cooldown, and to stop the kind of, oh look, I've just wiped the boss out in one hit. It just reduced the chance of people brute forcing it. But at the same time, if we're going to be prepared to do it, let us do it. And I'm glad they just decided, yeah, we'll let the players do that. Because it was leading to problems where you'd spend the first few turns setting up, doing a couple of injuries, you unleash all of your specials, then a cutscene happens in the middle of the battle and undoes all the damage you do or all the debuffs, and it got annoying. So it's kind of good to sort of just blast the enemy and just go, alright, now you've wiped out phase 1, now we're going to go straight to phase 2, or even just going half your parties use their limit breaks. Now you've got the other half to sort of build up. I actually had the reverse effect that it was, I mean, before I was really not using them, but now I save them more than I use them. I hardly ever use them on general mooks. I think that hard mode, with the extra XP and everything, is actually the optimal way to play. I found that I was doing a lot less grinding because of the extra XP boost, and the game was a lot more enjoyable on hard mode because the enemies were doing more interesting stuff. So that's good. There has to be something else put in the notes as well regarding statuses. Right now, there is dozens, and I mean absolutely dozens of different status effects. Some of them general, some of them unique, some of them that do the same effects but they can be stacked on top of each other, like bind and paralysis. And I kind of like that there's maybe 2 or 3 different versions of paralysis, so to say, but it makes it really difficult to figure out what the hell half of them do, because it's not mentioned anywhere at all. It's like the crazy one from for Daffy. I think that causes confusion. Am I sure? Not a chance in hell. I've used it a dozen times, and it next to never seems to do anything, apart from a handful of times I've noticed enemies attacking one another. But because targeting and all that in Rakenzarn Tales, you don't know what people are going to hit anyway. If it's just a random person in your party, you can't tell they're confused. Especially if it's only one enemy as well. There's a lot of cases where you are outnumbering the enemies in this game, so a confusion effect doesn't seem to do much. Oh, other things to cover, because I want to get some positives in there. I think the battle at the merchant settlement was absolutely fantastic. I keep saying this. The forced parties and the sort of flow of that, where you're jumping from one party to the next, was really good. I do think a few of them were not quite well organised, like the one with Dark Magician Girl, where nearly everything in that fight is resistant to dark, so she's practically a useless character. That felt just unfair. Not to mention I was down a character who I hadn't collected yet, so Vi was already a disadvantage. But I can see that being a reason why you want to go out and search for hidden characters. I still don't know how I'm supposed to get Rayman or Risky, and I didn't come across anything in the game that even gave me a hint of where I find those characters, so I'm probably going to have to go to the Discord server and just look that up, just so I can see their scenes. But I feel like the last part of the chapter was a massive missed opportunity. It should have been another one of those big battles. The Peak battle was awesome. Don't get me wrong, I genuinely enjoyed that. That was fantastic. After all the build-up and the frustration. But the rest of it just was like, oh, I know there's a whole thing saying show don't tell in media, but when it comes to games, play don't show. Let us do the damn thing. Also, the game has still got some cutscene incompetence, which annoys the hell out of me, but it's not as bad as it used to be. I still have a building frustration, and I feel like some players also had it, of just kill them all already. I mean, granted, the hero's a much better person than I am. I'm just a bad person trying to be a good one. I'm not a genuinely good person, I always feel, but I am quite short-tempered these days when it comes to dealing with fools. So by the end of it, having a kill 'em all attitude to those corrupt guards, especially since they were literally maiming and torturing people, I think they were too evil to be let live. I honestly think that the latter half of the game, with the actual mutilation of the cat people and all that lot, I'm going to go over that in a bit more in a bit. I've already mentioned this a lot in previous videos. It was just a bit too far. But there's also been a few things I've talked directly to Q about, and one of them was actually the prison cell scenario where they're going with the cubes, and I absolutely despise that random secret door nonsense, because it made no sense in a modern facility. And this random character, it just like saving your asses, when it was another case of, you're making our characters look crap again. Let the player feel like a badass. We're here to see our favorite characters kick ass and be awesome. We don't like seeing them fail. No. So that felt like, and when there's loads of scenes like that, there's another reason I hate Axel just coming up and saving the day all the time. I said it once, I'll say it again, he feels like a 12-year-old's OC. He's like Mr. Try Hard Be Cool. He's a cool character in terms of playability. I like his moveset. He's got the frickin' Yakuza themes, which I love. But, oh god, as an actual character, I hate him. I hate him so damn much. Oh. And same with our so-called rival. Well, you've heard plenty of that. But yes, mechanically, overall, the game is doing really well. I think it's going to keep doing really well, and I think it just needs a bit of polish. I think that the various places where you can go to shops needs to be increased. There's only like one place you can shop in the whole damn game so far, other than those little vending machines. The vending machines don't really have much in them. The shop doesn't really get upgraded enough. and it's an awkward thing to go through. I feel like this shop would be better if it was several shops broken down, because having that one person on all those menus to browse through is tedious as hell. I just want a weapons dude. I mean, there's other people around the side, but no one ever talks to them. If they were all like in the same spot in that one section, it would be just so much easier. I don't know. I don't like how the shop's laid out. It just feels awkward. I also feel that the fusion and all those recipe mechanics for making your own stuff, underused. It needs to be expanded. There needs to be a way to get arcades, like cheap crappy ones, which then we can improve into better ones, and I'd like more recipes to improve them into better ones, because that's really where you start falling down, is you have loads of these garbage ones, but not really too many of ways to get more of them if you need, and struggling to find how to equip them. That's my problem right now. I can't really get the right arcades on the right people and similar. Or alternatively, I've got some really good ones and I can't decide who to put them on, because the people I want to put them on don't have enough slots. The whole slot thing can be wild, because there's some characters just severely better than others because they have so many extra slots compared to everyone else. I mean, sometimes that's there to help with a character that doesn't have much, in terms of moveset. But, oof. It can be tough. It can be tough. Other things that I would like to see in the shops more are the cheap first aid kits. I've seen that you can upgrade them to the good ones, but I haven't actually seen anywhere you can get the crap ones other than the occasional fight. There's a lot of fights in this game that have no loot, especially against the human foes like the guards and stuff. They have no loot, and that makes no sense. They should be a source of healing kits and first aid kits or grenades and things like that. Cheap naff weaponry, because we beat a lot of them, we get nothing for it. Now, with the mechanics mostly covered, I'd like to focus on a little bit of the plot, and that's one of the reasons I'm down here in the corner today. We're going to be needing the big screen for most of this. Now, I'm going to address an elephant in the room. There's something I mentioned whilst playing, and I just want to address it a little bit further as well. I think Rakenzarn Tales has written itself into a corner slightly. By having the big names appear so early in the story, there's not really much escalation you can have. I feel that if Rakenzarn Tales was to be remade today, you'd find that the Nazi Guild has mostly D-listers and sort of small heroes, rather than the big names like Sonic, Mario, Luigi, and all that good stuff. And they'd appear as members later on, so like they're off doing a thing, and they come in as the big reinforcements like midway through the game. Is this going to be changed? No. I don't think we should at this point. The writing for the characters is quite good so far, and honestly that would be me redoing most of the game, which is just a terrible idea at this point. But it's going to be hard to address that kind of issue when it comes to furthering the plot later on. And you're going to have issue where people think that why isn't Sonic this powerful? Why isn't Mario and Luigi able to do this? How can these guys not just solo the problem in front of them? And yeah, that does come up every so often. I mean, not everything can be solved with a fist. As much as we'd like to. As much as we really want to just punch some of these people straight away, it doesn't work like that. And again, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of us that really, really wanted to punch that Morningstar Guild. Oh, we hated them. Actually, that whole bit feels like an aborted arc at this point. It feels like they were supposed to be bigger antagonists, but they were just so generally hated by the playtesters that they've been written out the story early. That's what I feel like with them right now. Don't get me wrong, it was damn satisfying to see Cheshire absolutely wreck them. But it does also feel like the Rakenzarn team just went, this is an idea that didn't fly very well, let's just get rid of these guys in a somewhat satisfying manner. So, what could be said? I think the character selection is quite good. It's a nice mixture of old and new. I do feel there's a few of them who could probably be relegated to secondary characters, backup characters, as opposed to, main characters who are in your party. And I keep saying this. I keep saying that the assist characters should be larger than the main party members, because this is also a workload issue. It's understandable with small characters. Taking Shaggy and Scooby, for example. They show up for one cutscene, then you're in your base for a while, you can talk to them, build up bonds, and they might have some unique quests and cutscenes that they're involved in at the base, and, for their own, unique missions. I would not be surprised if you built that bond up enough. There'd be a side quest, which is go find a haunted house, or it goes very mystery machine. We have to solve a mystery which turns out to be not an actual monster but a guy in a suit, which someone will inevitably point out that that's a terrible idea, because you're going to end up luring monster slayers to the area who will try to murder you. You're not going to scare people away. Are you dumb? I would love a little twist like that. And that's just off the top of my head. That's a genuinely funny moment I can imagine happening if something like that occurred for their little side mission. But I feel like there's a lot of characters we can do that with. This way you don't have to have them involved in major cutscenes. You don't have to write a load of dialogue for them, or at least not much. And you don't have to make up massive movesets. This also gives various characters who don't have a dedicated assist character the chance of having a dedicated assist character, and gives you a much more concise, well-built team, as opposed to, well, we've got lots of combos, but what the hell do I do with half of these guys? They're only good for a very specific element or something. And I do kind of like the team... what they call it? Sorry, lost the word for a moment there. I like the team attacks and team combos. They're really quite fun. It's one of the major things that I really enjoy about Rakenzarn Tales. It's just a shame that RPG Maker will not let you have teams of 2. It's got to be a trio. So that's actually kind of hard to put some of them together. I also need to say that I feel that certain chapters need to have character focus. Now, at the start, you've got a lot of people, and teams actually built up really quickly, just for the sort of first/prologue chapter. Daffy's a bit of a, spotlight hog, which is hilarious, because his whole issue is the fact he never gets the spotlight, and he makes great comic relief. But then you've got characters like Link. Now, we're going with the Link that can't speak, which is fair. It's a classic. It's kind of funny. But, again, he's played no part at all in any cutscene, nearly. And I do think Link should be removed and brought in later, now that Ganondorf has been revealed to be a major villain. It would be far better in terms of plot to have the characters go, okay, Ganondorf's back. Where the hell's Link? If Ganondorf's back, has he already dealt with Link? Because he's not afraid. He surely would be worried about the Master Sword. That means either he's dealt with Link in advance, or he doesn't care for some reason. And that would be a wonderful way for there to be sort of drama built up, or at least suspense, as opposed to Link just going ... beside a Ganondorf in the sky. And he's not a great character at the moment. He's a good all-rounder, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It's probably because he's actually balanced and doesn't feel OP. And Link, of all characters, probably should be OP, but, I think that just goes to show that the balance in the game for most of the characters is pretty damn good, that he's not. Yeah, let's just review it all from the start, I think, here, because I'm getting sort of sidetracked. The whole point of this video was to sort of condense it down into organised thoughts, not just me spitballing ideas. Having gone through all Rakenzarn Tales from the start again, I think that the build-up's pretty good. The introduction to the characters is really nice. The characterization of the characters is done really, really well for the most part. I think that even the somewhat generic mooks and enemies also have interesting character, though I do feel, and this is a big thing, that most of the low-level mooks and thugs, like the gangs, the kidnappers, all that lot are all the same damn person. It's how to explain this? They all have massive, sorry, childish tantrums when they start losing. All of them are kind of dumb. All of them just it's just awful. I mean, I guess it's to make the actual henchmen look better when they turn up, and Pete to actually look like a competent villain and exciting. But I do feel like the guild, the gangs, that lady whose name I can't remember who was kidnapping people, she had the opportunity to be a lot more different and interesting, but all of them kind of all fill the same role. Even the guard should be written a lot better. They're all for a bunch of guys who have slowly taken over and wiped out the actual legitimate guard and have taken over this corrupt inside force. They come across as absolute morons. They're no better than the gang members. And it just becomes one big generic blob of ugh. And I guess that's part of the build-up. That's part of one of the reasons why Kira gets really annoyed that he's dealing with these assholes over and over and over again. And where at the end of the chapter, when it's finally they're all dealt with, it's supposed to be this cathartic relief. But it drags on too long in some ways, and it gets a little tedious, and that could put players off. You could get someone who easily get quite bored midway through. And the other thing to remember is most of RPG Maker games will be finished within 30 hours. We're not even done through the first chapter within 30 hours. Granted, yeah, right, I was going along trying to collect everything, find everything, and I did knock a few hours off my gameplay because I had to go take breaks. Like you're supposed to. Take breaks in your gaming, people. Get a drink, have a stretch. Don't end up with me with spine like an S. But there's a lot, and I mean a hell of a lot of story. There's a lot of cutscenes, a lot more than your usual RPG Maker game. There's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of info dropping, occasionally sometimes a bit too much. Sometimes the tell don't show kicks in there. But for the most part, it's done well. Oh, and I think the villains chosen are reasonably decent. But that's going to be its own thing in a few minutes' time. The side quests attached to most of these characters as well, and the ones that are just done, which build up the world setting, those are all kind of good. There is the issue, however, that you have maybe 2 or 3 side quests that are all very similar all at the same time. Go rescue the people from the slavers. How many times did that come up? How many times was that a plot point? It got a little tedious and a bit confusing which person was which and what person I'm supposed to beat to, which of the quests I'm doing and forwarding. It's just it all gelled into one big thing. Honestly, I thought that it was intentional, that it was all supposed to be one big mastermind at the end, and it kind of was. There's a few of them, but they did follow on from each other. But overall, they weren't that exciting, sadly. I did like the mansion quest, though. Why the guy started revealing his major plot with his scam, why he did that in front of us, I have no idea. That didn't make much sense. And there's a big thing with villains in this, just kind of monologuing at people. You know, villains who are trying to do fraud and interesting. There's monologuing as a supervillain trait, yes, but why a low-level kind of rich guy who's trying to do insurance fraud starts telling us his whole plan? Why? I guess, yes, you need to tell the audience what's going on, because not all of us will get all the context clues, but I'm trying to honestly think of a better way that could have been done. I mean, it was played for comedy at the end. Scrooge McDuck coming and buying him out. That was hilarious. Don't get me wrong, that genuinely made me laugh. For this next segment I'm just going to talk about, I have actually recorded it twice now. Unfortunately, both recordings came out corrupt and they were quite long, so I'm hoping that in this attempt I can make it a little more concise and I don't miss any details, because I've been recording all this for quite a while. So, plot and a few things to address. mostly due to the world building. Now, Rakenzarn Tales is always going to be a difficult world to build. The more franchises you have, the more clashes you have. We've already established that things aren't exactly the same to the source material we've seen. Heroes can lose. We've had the equivalent of bad endings happening. And, there's also the presence of all the other things. The world is somewhat, 5 continents, with the central one being the one we start on, which is sort of the melting pots continent, which gives all the others access. And that has its own plot problems, but I'm just going to go it down now. There is unfortunately a suspension of disbelief is getting harder and harder to maintain as the game goes on and we get more and more detail added, and this is one of the things that sort of made me a bit burnt out by the end. And let me go all the way back and explain. Since I started at the very beginning of Rakenzarn Tales, the game was quite a slow burner. There was quite a lot of chapters, but there wasn't much main story progression. It was more focused on individual character arcs, which is fine. I can sort of see why there's a change of this, because we don't want the game to remain in development hell. With so many characters and so many focuses, you could keep the game going for like 50 chapters and still not be done. So I can sort of see why the team is now pushing the main story a lot better. And kudos to that. We want a completed game. But one of the things in original Rakenzarn Tales was the villains had learned from their mistakes. They teamed up. They were no longer doing the same old schemes. And rather than being megalomaniac, coming forward, big showy, events, what they were doing is something subtle. They were using smaller henchmen, third parties and all that to undermine areas and cause problems whilst they were working on a grander scheme. This was really interesting because it made me very intrigued about what that main scheme, that big payoff was going to be. And granted, that can also turn into a big disappointment, because if you have too much expectation, that could have burnt out. But it also had a, isolation style event, which was done by Pete and Bowser. And that felt like a means to the end, whereas in the more recent version, it feels like that's one of the major goals. Now, I wasn't overly keen on that, simply because it felt like I could just tell how the plot was going to go from that point. And also the big, huge announcement. But I'll cover the Ganondorf thing in a second. And actually, I will say now that the Rakenzarn Tales team did a very good version of Ganondorf. It's just I'm used to the old versions of Ganondorf. But they really made him loyal to the more modern version. But again, I'm getting sidetracked. The plot has become somewhat predictable, because we have these, I think it's 5 continents. Please correct me if I'm wrong, it might be 4, but we have our central one, the melting pot. And then we've got the one that's based on the Federation, which, from its name, is probably a federation of futuristic societies, all working together, which, honestly, that one's going to be the most interesting one to visit, because there's a good chance there's several of them working against one another, and there's a big chance of a big civil war with that. Where several different factions start fighting amongst one another, especially since we know that one of the sources of the corruption is coming from the Federation, and it could be a source of of a new major villain. We have the generic fantasy setting, which is all the small kingdoms, very much Fire Emblem, but with Mushroom Kingdom and all a bunch of other smaller games, all slapped together in one continent. We have no real information about the other two. And then we have our main one. There is a bit of a weird plot point where the Federation somehow has to contact people through this main continent, even though they're acting as sort of an Interpol UN force. And it could be just as a case like Visionaries. Technology is superseded by magic and doesn't work in some areas of the world. That would be quite a cool explanation. Sorry, I almost got it the wrong way around there. But how I foresee the future plot going is all the continents are going to be isolated, and then we're going to have separate teams of villains, all with particular themes, all trying to take particular areas of the world for themselves. So you have Eggman and probably Dr. Wily and a series of other sort of scientist-based villains all trying to take over the Federation, maybe. Or alternatively, kind of, if we go with Gundam or some of the other more sci-fi-esque villains, They might try to take Federation. You'll have Bowser wanting to take over the fantasy setting. Maybe Ganondorf, but then again, I imagine that each continent's going to have one major, huge villain. And again, that's kind of predictable, and it's almost feels like that's been done, guys. That's not a new plan by you. And since I had this expectation from the earlier versions of Rakenzarn Tales of there being some big overarching plan, I was a bit disappointed by something that seems very predictable occurring. But I might still be wrong. But that's sort of why I said I was disappointed and lost some of my enthusiasm, because I had that sort of curiosity shattered. Again, I don't know if I'm right, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I felt like the plot had become predictable. But this is another thing with the world building. We have this central continent, right? It's split into 3 sections. You've got the area that's basically going to be Castlevania, is all spooky and all that lot. It's going to have a lot of horror tropes. We've got the northern section, which we've not really been told much about, but I think is sort of, if this is the right place, this is sort of the one that's a bit like Japan. If it's like modern Japan, that would make it a bit curious why people are so surprised to see guns. And then we've got our current kingdom, which doesn't really have an identity. We've got Koopas, Moogles, and Goombas and Toads all there. Yeah, fine. But it's also supposed to be run by Mickey, as like Magic Kingdom. Yet, toons are something people are surprised to see, which feels ridiculous, because there's monster civilizations all over the place. So if you've got a talking friggin' mushroom, why is a talking duck such a surprise to people? Also, why are there not more of a toon presence or anything like that? It's just kind of a lot of generic human fantasy. So again, we've had these details thrown us and more, reveals about the area, but none of it gels together well. And this comes to a head with the Blue Lake area. The whole section there, the plot gets a bit too extreme and goes downhill. Now, I kind of like, us taking on the guard and the guard being corrupt and the coup. That's fine. I like the military coup. That's a thing that's going to happen. That's a thing that happens in a lot of these style games and adventures. I mean, the military uprising overthrowing the king due to an evil general, it's a classic. But their whole goal, especially since you've got this very prudish, horrible person in charge, doesn't make sense. The mutilation of the townsfolk, of the catfolk, and similar. I think it's just the catfolk that really get it, though. I can sort of, it's a step too far. It completely breaks the setting, because you have the massive taxation, like over-taxation on everything, which, first of all, is ridiculous. They take it too far for as a joke. I can understand that. The whole breathing tax nonsense. But what it should have been is they could have done that a bit more seriously and have it that the non-human elements were being persecuted through fines, like an ear tax. It's like, if you're not wearing your head scarf and all that, and you're revealing your ears and tails, taxed. As a public decency fine. That kind of thing. Even then, that would kind of be tolerable, but it would get the locals really hating them nonetheless. But if you are literally mutilating your townsfolk, and one of the rules is you won't let them leave the area, it's like, they saw these people as undesirables, wouldn't let them leave the town. So that made me really confused what the guards' aim are, because if they just wanted to exterminate these people, you could just round them up in the night, under false charges, throw them in jail, which they were already doing. They already had dissidents and people making fun of them in the jail. But this guy had the power just to round them all up and kill them all. So, why? I mean, are you after money? Are you after extermination? You definitely don't like these people and want to, persecute them. But it doesn't swing well in either direction. It doesn't even go far enough, or it goes too far in some aspects. And again, if you've got people who can't leave and they're literally seeing their neighbour mutilated, for just what they are. This is not the real world. I mean, as much as we have like mirrors to what's happening in America right now, this is a world where there's monsters on the outside. The hell, there's monsters in the sewers. There can be monsters on the streets if you're not careful in some areas. But we have a lot of people who know how to fight, are armed with magic, with blades, and you're asking for like full-on riots and rebellion. And even if you don't get that far, if the guard are, as have been shown to be, well-armed, intimidating, secure, you start having the reverse. You start having guerrilla warfare. You start getting guards dragged off on patrols and murdered in the back alleys. You start having guards getting poisoned when they go out for a meal. There's plenty of ways for there to be an actual resistance. And believe me, if the point where people start getting mutilated, that's when it turns violent. So again, if it was just people thrown in jail, I can understand why it hadn't turned to violence and people were like just being, scared, cautious, and all that. But the second you start cutting off people's limbs under those pretenses, that's a breaking point. That's a societal breaking point. Because there's no escape for these people, or their only choice is going to be horrible mutilation. So that I didn't like that. I just thought it was very heavy-handed and badly written. And also, the whole racism angle doesn't make sense in this area. Now, as a trading hub, as a central place, as a location of commerce, this is a melting pot, a mixing ground of a lot of different species from a lot of different continents. Yes, you're going to have cultural areas where people are going to congregate and stay together, and that just naturally happens. But through mercantile trade, those break down, because you can't be racist against the guy you're doing a deal with, because you don't get good deals that way. And this happens in real life, where you have these trading communities, and they're a lot more accepting than the rest of the country. So this whole thing coming on, unless these guards were brought over for the Federation and they had a whole human purity aspect to them, which we've given no clues to, because again, they don't stand out from your average dumb thug. That makes no sense they were doing this anyway. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I really did not like the Blue Lake arc. The other thing is the massive missed opportunity at the end. Again, as I've mentioned, I really enjoyed the Pete battle, but I do think it should have been broken down into a series of smaller battles with, teams facing off. Also, there was that big, overdramatic nothingness, which that dragon did nothing. That whole summoning arc and building up this guy who's summoning dual monsters, he was not intimidating nor interesting in the slightest, even with his link to Dark Magician Girl. He's a boring character. He did nothing in that sequence other than summon a dragon and go, "Ooh, I'm scary!" So yeah, he genuinely pissed me off just for dragging things out. And again, that's because I was playing for a long period of time and I was like, can we get it over with already? I want to fight something. I want to fight the boss. But again, that's just my personal experience. But Ganondorf, the thing that I had a bit of a hissy fit over, and I'll confess with that. When I grew up with Ganondorf, it's mostly with Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Hyrule Warriors. Those versions of Ganondorf are very different from modern Ganondorf, and I'm going to put up a big long bit of text explaining why. But Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time is cunning, he's charismatic, he uses brute force, yes, but he has set goals in mind. He doesn't really plot. Well, no, he's a very good plot, but he doesn't really boast or monologue until you force him and get him into a final confrontation. And hell, Hyrule Warriors Ganondorf, he is clever. He's manipulative. He literally gets himself resurrected through manipulation. The most recent version of Ganondorf. Well, how to explain that? He's good, he's powerful. He's probably the most powerful version of Ganondorf we've ever encountered. But he's not smart. Because of that power, he's a lot more of a brute force instrument like Bowser. And yeah, he is the boisterous might meets right type. Because, Ganondorf is, original Ganondorf, or early Ganondorf, shall we say, is coming from a background where he's from poverty, king of thieves. He's lashing out at Hyrule for jealousy and wanting to, claim some of that land and all that for himself. But he gets lost in the power, and he sort of, rather than making his people's lives better, he completely loses sight of his main objective and creates a land that's a metaphor for his hatred. Modern Ganondorf, it's very much like they explained in Rakenzarn Tales. He thinks that peace makes the world weak and soft, and he wants to go back to a time where might makes right, and only the strong thrive. So he's quite destructive, and he's quite happy to purge the weak, which might put him at odds with the other villains. And this is another thing which I wanted to cover, the villain motivation. Now we're going to this is going to be really interesting, because if my assumption is correct, and Project Isolation is to isolate all the different continents so different teams of villains can claim bits for themselves, there might be a few... it will probably minimize the villain-on-villain conflict. You will probably have all the villains who want to destroy a land in one location, or just out for murder and jollies in one location. You'll have characters like Robotnik, who are in it for personal narcissism, conquering... Cause Robotnik's... let's just compare Ganondorf to the other two big names here. Ganondorf is not a great character. And you can quote me on this. He's not a great character, but he's a brilliant plot device. You don't actually get to talk to Ganon that much. He doesn't interact with you very much. But he drives the plot really well. So don't get me wrong, I love Ganondorf, he's awesome. But as characterization goes, both Robotnik and Bowser are much stronger. Bowser started as a generic thug and brute, but in the more recent games, he's shown that not only is he sort of a father to his men, even if he does violently lash out every so often, and he will protect them, and hell, there's got to be a reason why the Goombas abandoned the Mushroom Kingdom to work for Bowser, and same with the Koopa Troopers. But he's also cunning. If you look at the RPGs, in the early RPGs, Bowser was always usurped and never the final villain. He was always kind of like backstabbed. But now, Bowser knows the tropes. He will see the backstab coming a mile away, and he performs his own backstab. He backstabs who you think the main villain's going to be and becomes the final boss. And that just shows how much he's grown. And also, he will fight anyone who's trying to destroy the world, because in his eyes, you're going to trying to destroy his kingdom, and he's not going to let that stand. So, when it comes to major villains in Rakenzarn Tales, I doubt we're going to see any Sephiroths, or any similar, I want to destroy everything types, because that will pit them directly against the likes of Bowser and Robotnik. Robotnik has a similar thing with Ganondorf, where Ganondorf has lots of different versions of himself, but they're all kind of reincarnations and never really build upon one another. Whereas there's a lot of versions of Robotnik, but all of them sort of draw inspiration for one another. And some of them are downright terrifying. Archie Robotnik, or Reglotnik as people like to nickname him, is just frankly the most terrifying of the bunch. The guy can literally outsmart practically any other side villain or character, and beat people to death with his bare hands if needed. He's punched Sonic more than once in nearly all in his forms. And the only reason Sonic's really still alive, or either of them are still alive, is because of their very toxic relationship in some ways. Sonic's a form of a free spirit and doesn't like taking away people's freedom of choice, which means he won't kill Robotnik because that will stop him from having the freedom to, well, redeem himself. And Robotnik refuses to outright kill Sonic, with a simple gun to the head, or anything like that, because he feels the need to fully defeat Sonic, in a meaningful manner, like to completely beat and wear down and outplay his rival. So the amount of times, we get Sonic in death traps, but Robotnik gives him a way out, or alternatively just, beats him up, takes what he wants and chucks him, it shows. So no matter what version of Robotnik we get, he's going to try and make Eggman land. Whether or not he wants humans or the local residents there to basically worship him to fulfill his narcissism, that's a hard call. It depends which version we get. But he probably will team up with the likes of Dr. Wily or similar geniuses, just because I feel like it's a really good mixture, and they've teamed up and worked together really well. It was only the fact their own narcissism when they start having failures that caused it to break down, and also paranoia. Oh, the paranoia of expecting the backstab caused them to backstab one another. So a little bit of irony there. What I don't know is who the next big bunch of villains are going to be. Because again, Sephiroth was a traditional fourth man, but he's too dated now and doesn't really fit in with the Conqueror takeover vibe. If anyone's got any guesses who it's going to be, please let me know. I mean, I see plenty of ideas for like B-listers or allies, but I don't see any good headliners off the top of my head right now. I'll probably think of a few and mention them in future videos, but right now, I am genuinely curious of who it's going to be. I've been talking for quite a while now, so I think it's time I just about wrap this up. What do we want to see from the future of Rakenzarn Tales as someone who's been around since the early days? I honestly hope you guys, in your next patch, finish off some of the broken side quests and mini bosses and, super bosses, secret bosses that are currently unavailable. I would love to see more of these, because those were always fun little Easter eggs. And speaking of which, in design, please, and I say this with all my heart, less generic mooks. Half the fun of Rakenzarn is seeing all these little references and Easter eggs from other game series. Rather than using the inbuilt RPG Maker sprites, it'd be lovely if we can get some sprites from, heck, even things like Streets of Rage or fighting games with Captain Commando. Use generic mooks from those if you have to. But have our monsters things we recognise. And there's a lot of places like Rip Game sprites out from there. They will look perfectly fine in the combat. You don't have to worry about that too much. And I'm really looking forward to more side quests, because the side quests is where you fill in all the little bits of your world. And we get all the little bits of secrets. I want to see more Bond quests. I'd love to raise that up. And I'm looking forward to seeing more skills and abilities being added to characters at a higher level. Because at the moment, we've only got so many levels before we completely run out of skills. And speaking of villains, I am genuinely looking forward to seeing who the major villain is going to be. Now, again, as I've said, Bowser, Ganondorf, and Robotnik all are pretty much guaranteed to be our headliners. Now, there's usually at least 4 or 5 of them. So who the other 2 are going to be, I don't know. Now, in the past, people would have said Sephiroth. But Sephiroth doesn't fit here. Sephiroth is not a conqueror, he's a genocider. And also, he's dated at this point. Final Fantasy VII is fantastic. However, Sephiroth is not a great villain in terms of working with others. I don't think he'd fit well in Rakenzarn Tales. He's the star of his own show. And I'd like to see more use of the henchman level or minor villains as well. I'd like them to have their own plots, own schemes. I mean, not all of them would have been involved in this, but many of them would see a opportunity. So that leaves us open to plenty of fun side quests, including them, plenty of little mini bosses, and even some Bond encounters that involve taking down a villain. Now, I keep saying this, I'd love to see Daffy and Katz face off again, as a Daffy Bond quest is one of his major ones, and sort of part of a redemption arc for Daffy of when he was, back in the day, a bit more of a miserly trickster and an asshole. Oh, but again, as I keep saying this, I believe the Rakenzarn Tales team can do this well, and they've got a lot of heart. And I also look forward to seeing some of more of their other projects. I need to go back and play a few more of them, but they've all been really fun. No matter what little game they have, they've always been enjoyable. So if you get stuck on one, feel free to take some time off and work on one of your other many projects, guys. Because no matter what you guys release, it's gonna be good quality. As long as you don't push yourselves and rush it. But thank you for listening. I hope some of this has been constructive. I hope some of it's been useful.